Eric Roman here from the DEO. And as a partner in the DEO, one of my absolute favorite things that I get to do is spend time with people like you, Gary. It brings me a lot of joy. And so, for those of you that are here today joining us that do not know who Gary Bird is and what he does, allow me to introduce you. World, this is Gary Bird, the founder and CEO of SMC National. SMC, you could just say it's a marketing company, but I say it's a heck of a lot more than that, Gary. SMC is a marketing company, and they specialize in generating new patients for specifically group dental practices, and they deliver steady, predictable growth. With Gary at the helm, if you don't mind me bragging about you a little bit, SMC has had the opportunity to work with some of the most creative, enterprising leaders in dentistry. And also, Gary, I know that you guys earned a spot in the Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing American businesses. Aside from that, probably the thing that you and I connect the most on is you've put so much effort into developing a culture where people come first. So, friends, if you haven't already had the chance, welcome Gary. Everybody, obviously have your chats open. We would love to hear from you as we go along. But Gary, the stage is yours. Take over, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to share with you guys today. I won't spend too much time on us, but I will tell you why we do what we do at SMC. We are passionate about helping people and practices grow. The people come first in that. As you can see, we put a heavy emphasis on making sure that our team members are growing, thriving, and really doing what they're passionate about. And we also try to help you with your team members to do what they're passionate about, which is serving your patients. And then from there, if our people are growing and your people are growing and doing what they're passionate about, practices always grow. It always follows. So that's why we do what we do. And this is my family. This is a big part of my why, and I have to feed all of them. As you can see, lots of bodies there. So Dr. Eric and I were just talking about people who live on the road and they go city to city and they run their businesses. And my first thought is, oh, you don't have kids yet. And we were talking about that transition of people trying to figure out once you have kids, what you have to do to kind of settle down. So that is my family there. And today I want to talk about the tension that you sometimes feel inside of your marketing and operations. And this is something that I've seen over and over and over again. I know it exists. I literally, if you've been in the dental industry for any amount of time, I know that you feel it. And the conversations often look like this. Marketing saying, hey, we've been sending tons of traffic your way, tons of phone calls your way. Maybe you're the problem. And operations says, why don't we have enough patients? And you could be having trouble with your online scheduling, and the office says, well, maybe we can hire, how can we hire an associate if we don't get the right kind of patients in? How are we going to build this de novo if we don't have consistent patient flow? And it really creates this just tension back and forth. And there's a reason that that's ever present and doesn't really ever go away. And we really want to solve that. That's what I'm going to help you with today, is to solve that problem. And the answer is predictable patient flow. And so how do we get predictable patient flow? We do it by emphasizing data over our fillings. When you opened your first dental practice, you could pretty much do everything off of your emotions or your feelings because you were there. You were there every second, and you were usually right. Your gut usually gave you the right answers. However, as you scale and as you grow, it's extremely hard to do that. And most of the time, the more practices you get, the harder it gets, right? The higher the tightrope and the bigger the fall when you get the wrong answer. And so what we're really focusing on is trying to remove that emotion that we have between those two, marketing and operations. Whether you're building your marketing team internally or building it externally, you really want to make sure that you remove the fillings from it and you just really focus on data. As you know, marketing has tons of data. So dentistry has tons of data, but then marketing has tons of data. So we're going to talk a little bit about what data to focus on today. And before I jump into that, I don't know if you know who this guy is. He is actually the first astronaut into outer space. Before he flew into outer space, this is a crazy story. He actually lived in a mud hut in Russia. He's from Russia. And he went from living in a mud hut for 3 years, I think about 3 years, and to flying a rocket into outer space in about a 20-year span. That's kind of what dental's going through right now. is that we had a way of doing things just a couple years ago, and technology has just flown by that. And we're now in a space where you can actually track lifetime value, real ROI, and just things that you couldn't track before. And so it's kind of like going from that mud hut all the way up into flying rockets into outer space. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what does it feel like when you have all the data to make the decisions that you want to make? And really quickly, I'm going to share something with you that what this presentation is going to be about. So I'm going to go deep, deep, deep in the weeds. And I asked Dr. Eric, I was like, how deep can I go? And he was like, I want you to go all the way into the weeds. So I'm
all the way nerd today, Gary. You have full permission. That's where we're going.
Awesome. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how we track things with our application for our clients that work with us. But I'm going to show you how we used to track it before we built our application to be able to do that. So you'll be able to literally take all the tools that I'm going to show you and track all of your marketing. And I will tell you up front, it's a lot of work, but you can do it. There is a way to do it. So I'm going to share that with you today. Okay, so here's what it looks like when you have clear data from your marketing to be able to make decisions. Number one, opening more practices becomes a lot easier because you know that their patients are going to be there. Hiring an associate becomes a lot easier. I'm sure you've all been there before. Like, I want to hire this associate and bring them into the practice, but do we have enough patients to make sure that to feed them and make sure that we're not going backwards? This is a big one. Cutting back on your marketing spend becomes easier. When you know where your patients are coming from, you can actually start to cut back on your marketing. And what I mean by that is a lot of dental practices, even big ones that I've worked with, when I say big, I mean over 50 locations, they don't know how many patients are actually coming from patient referrals versus their marketing. They kind of just lump them all together. And if you're doing that, it's really, really scary to cut any of your marketing, right? You're like, no, that might be the spot where all of our patients are coming from. So having clear data actually allows you to cut back some of your marketing. I often tell people, Dr. Eric, I'm kind of like a dentist. When I go to the dentist, they say, Gary, brush your teeth, floss, use this water pick, come in every 6 months, and you won't really need me. You won't have to pay me a bunch of money. What I'm going to tell you guys today is if you do the things that I'm telling you, you'll actually pay marketing less money, which is counterintuitive for a marketing guy like me, okay? Next is increasing patient flow becomes easier because you know where the patients are coming from. So you can actually put your dollars and your energy where you need to and where you're going to get the best bang for your buck. Helping your team succeed becomes easier. So the one thing that I've learned being a leader is that if you don't have clear KPIs, it's almost impossible to hold people accountable. You can't go to Susan and say, hey, Susan, you stink on the phone, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that. It's not possible. You have to actually have a number and say, hey, Susan, you're at 50% conversion on the marketing patients. I need to get you up to 80%. And here's the tools to be able to do that. And it really helps your team win. Having clear data helps your team win overall. And then holding your team accountable becomes easier, which I touched on. Identifying where your marketing systems or operational systems are broken becomes easier. And that's what it feels like when you have your data. Now, how do we do that? There's only one way to do this. And this is going to help everybody understand why it's so hard to get like a lifetime value or an ROI on your marketing. So there's something that has to happen. We call it a platform. You guys could call it whatever you want when you build it for yourself, but we call it a platform. So what it is you take your marketing data and you take your phone data and you take your website data and you take your PMS data and you bring it all into one place. If you're only trying to combine one or two of those, or if you have separate companies for all of these, which most people do, that means you have to aggregate all the data. And that's why everybody struggles to be able to get, what is my cost per lead? What is my cost per acquisition? What is my phone conversion just on my marketing? What's my recare rate just on my marketing? That's why people struggle with that so much, is because that's a lot. Just the phone data alone, most people say, oh yeah, we record and listen to all the calls, or we record all the calls, but we don't listen to them. Well, then you don't have all the data. You only have some of the data. Or if all your marketing data isn't being aggregated. So that's what we have built. We've built a platform to be able to do this. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. Then I'm going to jump in how to do it manually. All right. So this is the back end. So this is what we would look at if you had an office that worked with us or one of our clients. So this shows you how many leads or opportunities that you're getting. Now, a lead is only somebody who is potentially reaching out to you. Now, it's really important that you get super clear when you're talking to a marketing company, because marketing companies use different definitions than dental companies universally. Okay, so a lead to a marketing company means somebody clicked on a button, like a phone button, a call now, or a contact us form. That's a lead to them. So they'll say things like, oh, your cost per lead is $8 or $10 or something like that. A lead to a dentist is somebody who's reaching out to an office saying, hey, I need dental work. Those are two radically different things. So we're using the dental definition of this. So this is somebody, a lead is somebody who's reaching out to your office. They need dental work, and they're looking for somebody in your area to help them. And so what we like to do is we like to track all of our data on line graphs. This is something I learned a while ago, both internally and externally, but running my business as well as working with other businesses, is that you always want to track data on a line graph, because it allows you to see if you're actually trending up or down. If you're just looking at it in a spreadsheet and you're looking at only positive or negative, did we hit it or not hit it? That doesn't allow you to see which direction the company's actually going. So we track everything in a line graph. From there, we want to look at the breakdown of source. So how did they get in contact with us? Did they call us? Did they come through our online scheduler? Did they come through our chat? The reason we track that is those all have different conversion rates, and some are better and some are worse. And then that ultimately is going to get you to a cost per lead. This is how much does it cost to actually generate an opportunity into your business. So every dollar that you put in, what am I getting back? So here, this is this is just an example, $106 cost per lead to drive a lead in, okay? Then next, what you want to know, the next piece of data is how much does it cost to actually bring a new patient through the doors? So here in this example, we put a cost per acquisition of 203. Cost per acquisition means the patient walked through your doors. So the lead is just reaching out. The acquisition cost is actually getting them through their doors. And there's always a difference between those two. The lead cost is always lower than your cost per acquisition cost. Now, why do we want to track that? Well, there's different things that actually impact the cost per acquisition, and there's different things that impact the cost per lead. Cost per lead is really your marketing KPI that you want to look at. How is my marketing company performing? Cost per acquisition is more of an operational number. Why? Phone conversion, time to appointment, no-show rates because you didn't have the time that they wanted, or you muffed it on the phone. So it's really controlled more by the operations of the company. Then from there, we want to measure, and this is what we measure, is the recare rate of, and this is if you're non-specialty, right? So if you're ortho or specialty, it's different. But for GP, what is the recare rate of just my marketing? This number blows people's minds, because I always hear people will say, yeah, I got 5 practices. And I go, what's your recare rate? They go, oh, it's like 90-something%, 80, 90%. I go, what's your recare rate of for marketing patients? Oh, it's in the same ballpark. Then we get into their PMS, and it's usually like 60%, 50%, 40%, and sometimes even lower. I've seen it down in the 30 and 20%. This is what I call the glass ceiling that people experience. So what I'll talk to somebody who owns a practice. They say, Gary, we get 50 new patients a month. We have 2 doctors, and we spend $5,000 a month on marketing. And I go, oh, okay, so you should be full in the next 12 months, and you should never need any marketing again for another 3 years. You don't even need to talk to me. And they're like, no, we've had this same thing for the last 5 years. Well, that tells you that there's major bleedage there. You just can't see it. So if you go to any of the dashboards right now that are out there, you don't see it. It's invisible. It's literally invisible, and that's why you're not fixed. That's why it doesn't get fixed. And that's why you keep spinning your wheels, and you're like, well, I want to grow, but we're not growing. And that's it right there. So that's the black hole that I call that. The other thing that I think is really interesting right now is average time to appointment. So I've always told people, especially prior to COVID, 48 hours. You need to get a patient in within 48 hours. If it's emergency, same day. Well, since COVID, it's more like 72 hours because there's definitely more patients than doctors to do the service right now. But what I'm seeing is on average, right around 5 to 6 days is average time to appointment. And that's way too long. And that's what a lot of offices are experiencing. So if you do that, guess what happens to your cost per acquisition? If you're at 5-6 days, cost per acquisition is going to go up. And you want to be aware of that, because what should you do? You should actually cut your marketing budget if that's the case. So that's your cost per acquisition. Next is we want to see what our marketing to non-marketing ratio is. What our marketing to non-marketing ratio. Now, if again, this is for GP, but if you are a healthy practice, you should be 60-40 split of marketing versus non-marketing leads. So you can be 60% from marketing, 40% from patient referrals, or vice versa, either way. But that's a healthy office. If you're 100% marketing and 0% from patient referrals, that's unhealthy. And again, this doesn't count for specialty. Pedo Medicaid is different. But for GP offices, specifically the fee-for-service offices, or offices, if you're a PPO office, you really want to be around that 60-40 split. Now, if you don't know that, like if you don't know how many patient referrals you have versus marketing, that's a problem, because then you don't know if your patients are coming back or if marketing's driving your office. And that's like crucial to understand. So this is a really important metric that we measure. All right, next is we want to look at phone conversion just of marketing. So patient referrals, when they call into your office, those are slam dunks. Anybody can convert those. You could put me on the phone. You can put my kids on the phone. You're going to be able to convert those. But marketing's totally opposite. It's you actually have to have very specific skills, and they have to be tracked, and they have to be held accountable. Your front desk has to be, or call center has to be held accountable to these metrics. So we want to understand how many phone calls are we actually getting, how many of them are converting, and how many of them are going unanswered. That's a big one. So unanswered right now, the national average for unanswered is right in the 30%. So that's what we're seeing on our back end. I've talked to Amal at Patient Prism, Corey from Callforce, and a couple other people. We're all saying the same thing. About 30% of calls are going, 35% are going unanswered. Just to give you an idea what that means, if you're spending $10,000 on marketing, $3,000 is washed down the drain before they even get to you.
That's so, down the toilet, gone, dollars lost. We shouldn't have even bothered, right, Gary?
Yep. Yeah, you don't ever get that. You don't get a second chance, because they call the next office. So even if you
do you know what's funny too is, like, we all think we're outliers as practices, and if you don't actually have the hard data, you're probably the statistic, right? Because
I was at the farm on it. Yeah,
that was it. I remember the first time that somebody ran the data on my practices. I thought, yeah, we might be missing 2 phone calls a day. No, we were at like 40% missed calls, and I thought I was overstaffed up front, and we're still missing them. That's a nightmare, and you see it all across the board.
It's universal. Yeah. It's universal, not just with our clients, but that's the average that we're seeing, but that's the average that everybody's seeing who has anything to do with phones, is right in that 30%, which means, again, if you're spending $10,000 on marketing, $3,500 is going down the drain. You can hire a person for that, right? Like you could close that gap. Or if you know the data, you can cut back your marketing to make it more manageable, and you won't even fill it. You'll just pocket that $3,500. I
would like to pocket that $3,500, yeah. But that's our growth revenue too, right?
Yep, exactly. Okay, so 84% phone conversion. Now deeper than that, the other thing that we track, and this is really, really important, and I talked about this earlier, is we track how each front desk person is doing at every single office. And so you're able to go in and look at universally, how are we doing? So we're 84%. Okay, why? And then we can go in and look at each, Susan and Bobby and Joe, and see how they're actually converting. And this isn't all patients. This is just marketing patients. So we know we're protecting our money. We're protecting our investment, is the way that I think about it. All right, and then here's the golden nugget that we want to get to, is we want to be able to look at, okay, what was our budget? So if we got 4 or 5 offices, we're spending $30,000. How much treatment was accepted from that? And then we want to track lifetime value. So what makes us very, very unique is that we can actually, in our application, we can track lifetime value, and we can actually see that build up over time. And so you want to really understand that. And at bare minimum, you want to get to ROI, return on investment. The difference between ROI and lifetime value is lifetime value keeps tracking it month over month, year over year, and really allows you to see the impact of your dollars, where ROI just kind of gets a picture, a snapshot at one time, and tells you how you're doing right then, doesn't really tell the rest of the story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to track this manually. and really work through. And I'm going to give you at the end of this, what I'm going to do is there's a lot of SOPs that I've built for this, because we still have some clients that we have some that are on like certain PMSs that are like not really friendly to work with, and we can't get in to pull the data. Neither can any other vendor, right? And so we still have to go through and do this manually. Actually, several years ago, I was talking with Jake and I was like, hey, I figured out how to track ROI. And he's like, show it to me. And I showed him a bunch of spreadsheets. And he's like, you don't have a dashboard? I'm like, I'm going to get there someday, you know, but this is exactly what I showed him was, this is how we track it. This is how we can actually figure out for real if our marketing's working or not. So that's what I'm going to share with you guys today.
Well, and before you get into it, Gary, like I remember 10 years ago when I first entered the industry and I was working with what was one of the largest DSOs in the nation at that time. This was already, they knew that if they could find this data point, it was gold, and they couldn't. They struggled with it because the data was so hard to get. But this is, as I learned in execution, this is the difference between a campaign that sends me a ton of patients and I think I'm killing it, and then I learn that none of those patients are spending any money, and then a separate campaign that sends me a few patients that generates a ton of ROI for us, right?
Yep.
So just making sure it's clear for everybody why this is such gold inside our business.
Yeah, and hitting on that, it's really all about are we retaining them?
Mm-hmm.
And are they spending money? Like, do they actually want the service that we're providing for them? And if you can get those two answers, then you're probably going to win, right? Like that, you're going to win massively. So that's really what it's all about. So, okay. So first we're going to set up lead tracking via CallRail. Now we use CallRail. CallRail is a great company. You can use other accounts, but I'm going to use CallRail as an example today. And I know many of you probably use CallRail already. So what you want to do is you set it up, and then you want to import a list of tags that your analyst will be able to use to label each of the calls. Okay. So I'm just going to give you the list of tags that we use just to give you an idea of like all the different kinds of calls that come in. And you got to be able to slice and dice these, because this is what allows you to tell what's working and what's not. So you have like answering machine. So that's a marketing lead that goes to an answering machine and says, hi, I'm a new patient. You know, it's 6 o'clock or whatever, or maybe they went to voicemail because we couldn't get to them or whatever. That needs to be tracked. Answering service, we actually track the answering services separately because they usually don't do quite as good of a job as your team. So if you have an answering service, we track that separately. Current patients, right? So sometimes the current patients come through the marketing side, and you got to be able to weed those out. Insurance issues is a big one. So most people don't realize that you can end up, I'll put it this way. I have doctors who will say, well, AdWords doesn't work, or ads don't work for dentistry. And what's more than likely happening is they're just getting a bunch of leads of unqualified patients that don't participate in the kind of, they're not the kind of patients that they want to see. Then we have like lead scheduled, lead non-scheduled, new patients drive by. So those are patients that say, hey, I found you because I drive by your office every day before on my way to work. Insurance referrals. So you need to know those. We like to bucket those separately so we can see how many people are just coming because an insurance said to come here. Office referrals or doctor, we would call those doctor referrals. Patient referrals, print, radio, television. We put those in because it's funny, even people who don't run print, radio, or television still end up saying that they heard or saw us on television. Potential lead, repeat, unanswered, wrong number, out of range. And out of range is, hey, I'm in, I wanted to come in for a dental appointment. Oh, great. Let's get you scheduled. We're in Raleigh. Oh, I'm calling you from California. That's probably not going to work. Right. So, you need to track that as well. That's another area that your marketing campaign might be bleeding. And then, so you're going to have a list of calls now that are going to look something like this, and you're going to want to get the potential leads. And then you're going to want to look at the leads non-scheduled. So let me go on here. So then from there, you're going to want to set up lead tracking. And so how you do that is you create a number that enables call recording inside a CallRail. And I have a complete SOP right here for that. And at the end, I'll give that to you. And then after that, you want to create a fall flow. This is really important. This will save you tons of time. So what you want to do is on your phones, you want to create a tree. And so you have your tracking number. And that tracking number, the patient's going to call in, and it's going to say, thank you for calling ABC Dental. Press 1 if you're a new patient, or press 2 if you're an existing patient. And what this does, it'll automatically tag your calls for you. So you're not having to listen through thousands and thousands of existing patients. It makes it almost impossible. Again, our backend does this automatically, but if you're going to do this yourself, that's really, really important that you do that part. Okay. So next is dynamic insertion. Now don't let that fancy name intimidate you. All that means is that we put a rotating number on your website. And so what that does is every time there's a new visitor to your website, it rotates the number. And sometimes doctors say, well, how are they going to remember my number? And I'm like, well, nobody remembers anybody's number, right? We just press the button and save it in our phone. So this rotates. And as you can see here, I put an example. So if you visited here and then I visited, I would see a different phone number. What this allows you to do is actually see where all of your traffic is coming from online. So if someone comes from Yelp, you can see, oh, this person came from Yelp. If someone comes from Google, you can see Google, so on and so forth. And again, I have a whole SOP built out, literally how I trained people in the past. We pulled that together for you. All right, next, we integrate CallRail with ad platforms. So now what we have is we have phone numbers, we have those on our websites, and we can see where traffic is coming from. And then what we want to do is integrate all of our ads to this platform as well, because now we can see what ads are performing, how they're performing, all those kind of things. All right, and then next. Okay, this is crucial. Here's where, remember that picture I showed you of the two people fighting, tugging back and forth? Okay, you've probably heard this before, but we sent you hundreds of leads. Have you guys ever heard that before? But we sent you hundreds of calls. We literally see the calls. Here's why and this is not the marketing people's fault, and this is not the office's fault. This is just unclear data in the middle. So what happens is that someone will run a marketing campaign and they'll say, okay, I want you to market as a lead every time somebody clicks on the phone number. Okay, that's great. But then you're looking at it and you're going, well, we only got like 2 or 3 new patients from that. And they're saying, well, I have hundreds of people that called and we have the call metrics here to back it up. Like, we have all these calls. So what's the disconnect? Here's the disconnect. On average, 65 to 80% of new patient calls on the marketing line are not actually new patients. Okay, so the reason that your marketing company is saying, hey, I sent you all that traffic and we see that they called, and you're going, well, I didn't see all of the, I didn't see that many people come through, is because out of every 100 calls that you get on just the marketing line, about 20 of those are new patients, like real new patients. So if someone's saying, I'm getting you all these leads, they think they are. The marketer really thinks that they're driving you tons of leads. They don't realize that there's a big gap in there. And this is something that we noticed early on. So this is something that we began to track. And so you really have to have somebody who's going to go through these calls and sort them and figure out, okay, which ones are real opportunities so we can get more of those, and which ones are not real opportunities so we can get less of those. All right. And then from there, we have to connect the PMS side now. And this is where it gets a little bit, or it does get into the weed. So then what we want to do is we want to put every single new patient into this sheet that I provided for you. And it looks like this. And then you want to track all the information here. And so unfortunately, because of the way PMSs are structured, you have to do this manually. And you just have somebody at the front desk every day. It takes them about 5 to 10 minutes at each office, end of day. And they go through, they put all the names in, and then they put how much treatment was planned, how much was completed, how much was scheduled out. And then that allows us to tie it back to all that other data I just showed you. And then that will give you a final picture that looks like this. So you'll be able to say, okay, at practice A, I had $4,500 budget. My goal was 40 leads. I got 50 new patients. 25 came from marketing. 25 came from patient referrals. I had 35 leads. My phone, obviously you wouldn't have your phone conversion in there, but, oh no, you would. Actually, you would. You'd be able to go through and see if you listen through all the calls, how many unanswered calls, and then what was my cost per lead, and then what was my cost per acquisition. And so you'll be able to see that month over month, and then you can then begin to put it on line graphs. This is what we use, again, if we have somebody who we can't get into their PMS for one reason or another, and you're able to put it on a line graph, and you can see when patient referrals are dipping, patient referrals are up, marketing is dipping, marketing's up, and your overall goals are being reached. So that is all of it. How'd I do?
Gary, you crushed it. We got time to talk in a little bit more detail about it. So number one, opening it up for questions from our audience. So if people have any questions, and that was so outrageously awesome and dense with the way you do it. First question that popped into my mind, Gary, how come none of our practice management systems have automated this or like really supported it, right? Like you have to be asking yourself that every time you build this out. Right?
Yeah. So it's actually, there's actually a simple answer to this. So the reason that most of the softwares and things like that don't tackle this is because there's usually a missing component, one of those 4 components that I showed you up front. So you got to get the PMS data. Obviously they have that. You have to get the website information, and then the phones, they don't have the phone information, right? So where are they going to get that from? And then they have to get, even if they could figure that out, they still have to get with the marketing, and marketing's all over the place, right? And so it's too,
they haven't had what they've needed to be able to do it. So why bother?
Yeah. Well, it's just, they're just trying to figure out what they're doing and get that accurate. Right.
And let's be honest, they're not doing a great job. So we mean, this is no offense to our friends in practice management. You're getting better, but we've had to come a long way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard. Like it was a lot of, I mean, I see it right now where it's like just getting a group of offices to all use the software the same way. People are like, whoa, that's an undertaking in itself.
Yeah. And I'll plug again for questions that anybody has as we're going along, but I had a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about, if it's okay with you, Gary.
Yep, absolutely.
So number one, let's talk a little bit about chat. How is chat working in your customers' businesses right now?
It's different. So it depends on where you're located, and it really, it works great for certain offices, and the conversion rate's actually comparable to phones. So it can get up into the 70, 80, 90%. And then in other areas, it can be not as great, and you can get a lot of leads and your conversion can be really low. And again, there's so many different things that come into play: income, how tech savvy the area is, if it's more rural, things like that. So really just knowing what is my conversion rate on my chat, just that question alone is a daunting question for most people. And if you can get that information, then your marketing team will be able to go, oh, I shouldn't do any chat. You know what I mean? Let's get rid of it. Or, hey, we need to drive more leads to chat because it's saving us labor and it's saving us time. And we can have the people in the office actually focus on the patient. So it just depends on where you're at.
Yeah. And Brian asked a really great question. Sitting here and looking at all these innovations in phone tracking, the question was, do we have to change our phone system to your system to be able to make this work? Because there are providers out there that force us to do that, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, no, we can just lay over the top of whatever you already have for the most part. Like
whether it's landline or voice over IP, I assume, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that was not always the case. I remember at the early advent of tracking softwares, it was like it could be a deal killer if you were running voice over IP because everything was copper wire, but yeah, the times have changed. Technology, right? It moves fast.
Mud Hut to a rocket.
Mud Hut, Yuri Gagarin, right? Like, isn't that his name? Yeah, I think we got it. So do I get extra points for knowing Yuri's name?
That was really good. I couldn't even pronounce his name, so I didn't even.
Yeah, I didn't pronounce it right, but yeah, his name was Yuri. We'll go there.
Yep.
Hey, so segue, and would love more questions. Great question from Brian. If you have a follow-up, Brian, let us know. But you talked about how there's so many other variables just inside of chat or anything else. You touched on the appointments of timeliness of how quickly we get these patients in. And that was a data point that for me in operating a dental group it was like the cornerstone of multiple dental groups that I built. And as a cornerstone, our point was today or tomorrow was the adage we taught our teams. And what we learned, kind of giving you a little bit of data, and this is about 8 years ago, our data 8 years ago said that if we booked our patient today or tomorrow, relative to when they communicated with us, we had over a 98% of chance of realizing that appointment.
Yep.
The moment we left today and tomorrow, it dropped by 20%. the likelihood of realizing. Now, that was my market. That was, a different space and all that sort. But
It's
dude,
huge.
20%?
Yeah. That's on the top. The thing is that when you're talking about massive numbers of like 30% unanswered or 20% drop at the top of funnel, that's when you take the total number, like it just your bottom number.
The N is hundreds in some of these businesses. That was a better way to say it, is you literally missed out on 100 patients by not having enough availability.
Yep.
Very simple, but you did pay for them. So congratulations, right?
You did. You still pay for them regardless. So knowing this data allows you, I said it early on, if you know these numbers, you can actually start to cut back on your marketing when things like that, because things like that happen, right? Where it's like, hey, we're consistently missing calls, or we can't get them in. We don't have a dental assistant there. So then when you see the numbers not performing properly, then it's like, let's cut back our marketing a little bit until we get the dental assistant in or the hygienist in or whoever.
Yes. And the other thing that you're pointing out, Gary, that's kind of antithetical to the entire marketing industry, what we just talked about, that extra money that we're paying, well, most of the times that was actually a victory, and that's profit margin for the marketing company. So I think for everybody that's listening, it's kind of interesting to catch on to what you're saying. Is you're actually saying, hey, I don't want you to waste money on me. I want you to get what you want, right?
Yeah,
and that's a shift.
Yeah, it's a huge shift, because here's the thing. This is what I believe. If you set other people up to be successful, then you will be successful. If you look for your own success first, then usually you're going to have a hard road at it, right? And I know that most of these doctors that we work with and most of the groups that we work with, they really try hard to treat their patients well, give them a good product and service, and make sure that they come back happy, right? Like if the crown falls off, even if it's the patient's fault, I know what are most doctors going to do? Hey, you know what? Well, we got you. No problem. And so we try to be the same way. And that's why we don't do contracts. Everything's month to month. It's all about the numbers. If you can make the numbers work, and we're not for everybody, but we're mainly focused on growing groups. That's why we're here with the DEO. But if you can grow, and you want to grow, and you want to have clear numbers, we're really a good fit for you.
I love that. So we've got a couple more questions. So Brian, after he asked the question about phone line, said, so if we don't have a website or use any social media right now, do you have a company you recommend for us to use to integrate and use the best practices, right? Or is this something that SMC could do for them?
So let me just read that question. So if we don't have a website, so you don't have a website for your practice?
Right. And no social media presence so far. So they're playing, Brian's playing a little bit blind with it, not having that exposure. Is that something that you guys do, or do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, no, we only do digital marketing. So everything's digital. So like the thing that I think that most people, the dental industry for a long time thought that, hey, a website's kind of like just like an online brochure. What's really happening on the web right now is that you can track everything. Like it really allows you to track, and it also allows you to retarget. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand about the power of the web, is that we know everything about everybody at every second.
For better or worse.
Yes, exactly. But for marketing, it's very powerful, right? Like we're able to really hone in. And so, yeah, it would be really hard to help a practice that didn't have a website.
And yet you would build that for Brian right away, because that's what you do as a pro, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. If you're like, hey, we need to get this done, what we do is we build a platform, and a platform is the website, and then it's the marketing data, the phone data, the PMS data, and then we tie that all together into one place that you can go and look and figure out, okay, my marketing's working or it's not.
Yeah. And so the cool part about what you're saying too is not only are we going to give you a website, right? Not only will we help you there or optimize it if you already have one, but we're actually going to be able to give you the data you've been missing about how effective it really is. Not what somebody said when they convinced you to pay for it, but actually what it's generating in terms of true ROI, retention, all that stuff.
Yeah, shout out to Sherry. She's on here. She uses us. So yeah, we can definitely, she just said we can definitely help you out. Another question on here is, what about direct mail? Direct mail's tricky because it's a broad outreach, right? It's not laser focused. So the way I like to describe it is, what we're doing is like buck hunting, where you get one shot for one kill, and you can kind of, if you hit or miss. With like direct mail, billboards, things like that, I'm not against those, but they're broad. right? So it's very, very wide, and it's like throwing a net into the ocean. And so you're going to catch some fish for sure. You're going to catch some things you didn't want as well. And it gets a little more tricky. We don't actually do the postcards for people, but I have tracked it with people. I have yet in the last like 3 or 4 years to find anybody that can get a cost per lead lower on postcards than you can on digital. The last time I saw it was about 5 years ago. It was in a little town in Missouri, and they were getting like cost per acquisition like $50-$60. I think it was because they didn't have a lot of dentists that were sending postcards. The other tricky part about postcards is when sometimes they do work really well, but then they stop working and you don't really understand why.
Yeah.
That drives me up the wall. Like I cannot have data that I don't know why it's happening. And that's postcards. So postcards, what impacts it is if you send your postcard at the same time as all the other dentists send them, then you're sharing the same cut of the pie. Where if you send it and no one else sends it, if you get lucky like that, all of a sudden your results will go up. So it's really a luck game when it boils down to it.
That's really intriguing to hear you say that. I was kind of a direct mail overuser, and I had never considered that point in it, but we've heard the exact same. I mean, even for years, like some markets were extremely expensive. They were $500 per patient on direct mail.
Yeah.
And that was fine when we didn't have your digital knowledge to be able to dial in everything else. Like when everything was dumb, another dumb thing that got us a few patients was fine, right?
Yeah.
So the world's just getting too smart.
So if someone said, hey, I get my cost per acquisition is $500, I'd be trying to slash that thing by 60%. Like
yes.
Digital, and if you track it, you can cut that by 60% without even blinking an eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it only matters though when we have that knowledge and we have the data that you can provide, because that's what we're talking about. Data being better than feelings. I operated on feelings for so long, right? Because the patient brought in the flyer. They brought in that little postcard. So this thing must be working, except that wasn't actually data. That was just, that was, we'll call it highly subjective feelings, right?
Yeah.
So another thing that I wanted to point out, Gary, that was a really big deal to me and kind of like made me want to cry a little bit was we operated very frequently with, did we hit our target or did we not? Not what you talked about with the importance of line graphs to be able to see trends in our operating. I'm actually doing that right now in my personal life with like budgeting. Yeah. I was sitting there and realizing, oh, cool. So I hit the number. And then I was like, wait, I should actually be worried about what my trend is right now and not necessarily what the number is, right? Because a lot of times too, we could be off on our number, but we could be trending in the right direction. And that gives a heck of a lot more peace.
Well, it's like, I could be like, Eric, you missed your number. Why didn't you do that? And it's like, if I looked at the last 6 months, you're still trending up. And yeah, there's a little plateau here, but you're still nosing up. Like I should be praising you, not you missed your number by a little bit, or vice versa. I could be praising you like you killed it this month, but your trend's actually down. So yeah, knowing your trend is huge.
Yes, that's something that we can all do a better job at. Gary, tell me a little bit about how you guys provide the data to your customers, because I know that like a lot of times, people do it different ways. Do you do it downloadable? Do you have access that I can get to a portal? Like what's your method?
Absolutely. So the main thing, oh, hold on one second. I'm going to pull this up for everybody. If you want to scan this so you can get all the stuff that I shared today. So you can either schedule an appointment with us, or you can scan it and get all the data that I shared with you today to build out your own tracking. So to answer your question, you'll have a login, and you'll be able to log in and see how all of your offices are performing, and you'll be able to see this from a high level. So if you have our biggest client has 100 locations, so they can go in and look at all of their locations. And then you can go in and look office by office as well.
That's absolutely awesome. Again, that's come a long way. I know a lot of the marketing providers out there don't have the ability to deliver the answers and the data that in that manner, and in a timely manner at that, right? Which that's probably another variable of data, right? Is the timeliness of it. Well, would you like to talk about that for a moment, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can log in and see what's going on with your marketing like today and yesterday. So that's huge, right? So you're not it's really the difference between being reactive and proactive. And we're working on things to actually even get more proactive, so where you can actually start planning forward. But yeah, that's so important, because if you look at the month and the month's already over and you didn't hit your numbers, then that kind of stinks and there's not a lot you can do about it. But if you're looking week by week, you can actually make, I mean, I have people that reach out all the time to say, hey, we're down, or our patient referrals. I had this happen one time. Somebody had 2 hygienists quit, right? We've all been there before. And the hygienist quit and their patient referrals fell apart. Marketing maintained, but their patient referrals dipped. And so they had to spend more money on marketing until their patient referrals caught back up. That kind of stuff happens. And if you watch it on a weekly basis, you can actually make your adjustments so you hit whatever numbers you're trying to hit.
But if you're like me and you're not operating, but like 6 weeks too late, you've already had a catastrophic profitability hit, right?
Yeah.
So that's that timeliness is so huge. Hey, if you're in the chat there, Gary, Hilda dropped in a question from Catherine from Facebook. You want to take a look at that?
Yeah, my phone barely rings at my startup. I barely get 5 new patients a month. What should I do? Well, what are you spending your marketing on? Like, what are you spending your dollars on? What I would really say, really at the end of the day, is, give us a call and we'll happy to talk to you. But I wouldn't spend money on marketing unless I knew what was going on with it. Like, that's just how I feel about it. And again, that's why I answered all the questions that you had the way that I did, is that I want to know what's going on. I want to see what's going on, and I want to see how people are actually responding to my marketing dollars. And if you don't have that, then you're really operating on your feelings. And sometimes your feelings are really negative, right? So you're like, I'm not getting any calls. What could it be? It could be because one of your lines is down at your phone, or it could be because your website link is broken, or it could be because your Google My Business isn't set up properly. I could go on and on and on, but until you have actual data and you walk through the troubleshooting process, and when I say that, I mean all the way from marketing all the way into clinical and through the operations process, then it's hard to really nail down what the problem is.
Yeah, and so your point is loaded question. We need a lot more data, but Catherine already could see the QR code to scan. Set up the call. You guys will get to the bottom of it, because that's what you are. You're dental sleuths. You're pros at this, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely figure it out. And again, we're not for everybody. There's certain people have problems that we can't solve, and if that's the case, we'll let you know that. So we go really in depth with people to make sure that we can meet the needs that you actually have.
And Brian dropped a little bit of a secondary question in there. And while you're taking a look at that, Alex was talking about, Gary, are you going to be at the Scottsdale DEO Growth Summit? And the answer is darn right. We're going to be there hanging out with you, Gary. And that's a perfect place for everybody to get some FaceTime with you and your incredible team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're bringing like 20 people to that. It's something like that. So
that sounds amazing. We're going big out there, huh, Gary?
Going big, yeah. Going big. We're virtual. So we were virtual before it was cool to be virtual.
Yeah.
So whenever we get a chance to bring the team out, we have about 75 team members across the United States. And so we're using it as an opportunity to kind of show them what the DEO is all about, meet all these awesome offices, and as well as to connect with one another in person.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a DEO team's the exact same way. We use the events to get to know each other.
Absolutely. So most offices the question for Brian is, most offices usually have the front desk answer the calls while tending to patients who come in. When doing this type of marketing, do you always recommend to have a dedicated call center person that it can only handle calls? And let's say you're setting up different lines for different languages. Will the office team member know the language of calls that are coming in? So if you have different languages coming in, I'll answer from hardest to easiest. If you have different languages coming in, then you need to send the language calls to somebody who speaks that language, right? Like, they need to be available for that. But there's lots of different companies that can solve that part for you. But on the having somebody answer the phone, if your front desk people are leaving the front desk to go tend to patients, which I believe if I was a front desk person, I would 100% tend to the patient in front of me before I tend to the phone. that means you need to turn off your marketing, right? Like you shouldn't be running marketing during those times. So you either need to have someone answering your phones, or you need to be timing when you're turning off your marketing, which is definitely possible as well. So again, so it's not wasting money. That doesn't mean people still won't call you and go to your voicemail. It just means that you won't be spending dollars, hard-earned dollars, and having it go down the drain. Awesome, Alex. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you as well.
Do you know, back to Brian's question there, Gary, one of the things that I first fell in love with you about was your operational wisdom. Was the, like, I was joking earlier that I feel like you had my office bugged for years when you would hear these conversations of marketing people fighting with operations people, right? And so your level of operational knowledge is so deep. And like another challenge for Brian, we talked about the importance of timeliness, even timeliness during the day, right? And so at the same time with that, we can learn about our missed calls. Guess what else we learned? People call, we have different call volumes at different times, right? And so guess what? We needed to adapt our staffing and our number of people who could answer phones to certain periods. Because what we found, why were we missing calls? Is because the same time it was busy at the front desk was the same time that everybody was trying to call. It was like power hour, right? And we were just getting hosed inside that window and missing a ton of opportunities.
So the way it looked like, I mean, go look at like a Chick-fil-A or an In-N-Out. They have particular staff sizes at particular times, and they have smaller staff sizes at other times because there's ebbs and flows. If you're just staffing the office, especially if you're spending a lot of money on marketing and you're just dumping money towards marketing and you have the same staff all day at the same positions, like there's going to be times where they're sitting around doing nothing. And then there's going to be other times where they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, that is so the truth. And I mean, even going further on Chick-fil-A, they technologically solve for that too, right? Because they're during peak hours, they take the iPads out there and they keep the line moving under all circumstances. What might that sort of approach look like inside of our practices when we have everybody coming back from lunch, right? And lunchtime was actually a big one too. Guess when your patients want to call and figure out stuff, they wanted to call at lunch when they're on a break. Well, guess where my team was? They were on a break. And so we had to totally shift our staffing numbers and hours and such in order to meet our demand periods. So like, I mean,
I saw a picture yesterday online floating around on Facebook of a front desk, and a person said, I'm at my dental office, and it had somebody on a computer screen from some other country, and they were live on the computer screen. They had them zoomed in all day, and they were checking patients in and out at the front desk.
That's like genius.
That's genius. That's exactly.
That is so genius, you know?
I said, man, that's good.
Do you know one of the things also that you and I like to talk about a lot, Gary, and we've only got a few more minutes left, but what trends, now that you guys have such insight into the data of what's taking place, back to our timeliness of data, people are experiencing things and processing it emotionally because they don't have data right now. Yeah. What sort of data are you seeing that might substantiate some of what we're feeling? Like what's going on right now in our industry?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I learned when I started looking at the data, and I had a hint of it because I would pull this all together in spreadsheets and I'd look at it and I go, I wonder if this is universal, right? One of the biggest ones is keeping patients that are coming in from marketing. You are bleeding them more than likely. If you're not tracking it, you're probably losing 70, maybe even 80% of them. It could be, right? Like it's just, they're going out the back door. And it's like, for me, it's just like, let's just fix that, right? Like if we just fix that, it's just such a huge win. The other thing is there's actually an abundance of new patients right now.
Whoa.
People hear me say this all the time. They're like, oh, I'm only getting this many new patients. It's like, it's not, there's actually more new patients than there are clinicians to fulfill the need of those patients. There's a bigger demand. But dentistry is behind the curve on operational efficiencies, which I know that's what you guys are working on and focusing on, is helping fix that. But we're behind the trend on this. And so what's happening is that you got this many new patients that want to come in. You can only see this many, but your operational onboarding, if you will, or bringing new patients into the office can only get this many in, and nobody can see it because no one's talking to each other. So the PMS isn't talking to the phones isn't talking to marketing isn't talking to the on and on and on. And that's that tension that everybody feels. And if you can overcome that with just a little bit of clear data, you can then start making decisions that are actually going to impact your practice in a positive way.
That's so cool. That's a really interesting, it's almost the counter data point, like relative to Catherine. That's got to give Catherine a lot of peace to sit there and say, listen, yes, you only have 5 new patients right now in that location, but it's actually, the trend says that there's a lot more. We're just having to figure out what we need to do to capture them, right? And then the flip side of that, to your point about our operational, we'll call it weaknesses, right? I have so many of our members and clients, members in the DEO or clients that I work with in coaching that are talking about how they just don't have, like, they've lost hygienists, or they've lost operational bandwidth. And so how are they going to be able to get these patients back in? You're saying that's our bigger issue, and that we're actually upticking, and maybe that's one of the reasons that we're seeing an increase in patients being willing to move around right now too. It's because they're getting a phone call from their office that they can't see them right now, and their teeth are yucky, and they want to get it. They want to get them touched up, right?
Patients don't want to. New patients from marketing don't want to wait. They're not waiting. They're not going to wait a week to get in. In fact, that's one of the first questions that we ask people when they are considering using us, our services, is, when could you see your next hygiene appointment? And if they're like, oh, it's 3 weeks out, it's like, you don't need us. There's no reason to even take this conversation any further.
Yeah, humans in general don't want to wait for anything right now, Gary. Like, yeah. I just want to buy it literally right now from my phone and have it done. Do you know what? I'm starting to get angry at Uber because it's taking them 10 minutes to pick me up. Yeah. That's too much now. I'm like, if it's not 3 minutes, I don't know that I want your service. I might rent a car again, Yeah. So go figure. Well, Gary, any final thoughts? Everybody gets the opportunity. Good. Get the QR up there so that everybody can connect with Vic, who is absolutely the man. Yeah. If anybody doesn't know Vic, they just haven't been in the dental group space for long enough. So at the very least, they get an opportunity to meet a hero of dentistry, but even better, they get more time with your team. Anything else that you want to add, Gary, before everybody gets a chance to meet you face to face in Phoenix?
No, if you have any questions, download all the docs and all that kind of stuff. And in full transparency, it's a lot of work to track all that stuff. So if you are in the situation where you want to do that, if you have any questions or anything, I'm on social media. I mean, Dr. Eric knows you can connect with me if you want to, and I can try to help you out the best that I can. And then, if you want to meet with Vic is, I was actually just about to say this, Vic knows I've never been on a call where the call doesn't start with, Vic, how's it going? And I'm like, man, okay.
Never. Never.
Everybody knows Vic. So if you don't know Vic, he's an amazing human being, and he would be happy to talk through. And if you know, the other thing about Vic, he's the most chill dude ever, right? Like, he is so laid back. I hate pressure sales, so we don't have a pressure sales system. We just ask questions and we try to educate. And so if you'd like to learn more about what we can do for you, we're happy to talk to you. Either way, we're always happy to help. I really want to see the dental industry succeed and people win. And whether that's with us or someone else, I believe there's tons of opportunities for everybody to be successful together.
Amen to that, Gary. And Gary, on behalf of myself and the DEO, Hilda, by the way, thank you for pulling everything together in the background and making this work for us. But Gary, I'm so thankful to have you in this industry, have somebody with your heart and desire to solve questions. If you'd only been there for me 10 years ago, it would have made my life so much easier. But now we get the future together, which is better than the past. So Gary, thanks for your energy, for your time, and for your commitment. And if you are not yet signed up to be at the DEO Growth Summit in Scottsdale, I don't even know if there's any tickets left. So if you're not signed up, you better get your crap together. So I'll see everybody there. Gary, thanks again. Thanks to Eve and your team, and we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.